If someone claimed to be from the year 2062, would you scoff at him? Or would you listen to what he had to say? In 2010, in Japan, an anonymous figure who identified himself as coming from the future stirred up the entire Japanese internet community with a series of warnings about what was to come. And then, one by one, those warnings began to come true. But the most terrifying part is this: the final warning he gave in 2022 still hasn't happened. And according to him, the year 2025 marks the first major turning point in that dreadful prophecy. So what exactly was that warning? Let's find out in today's video. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you'll have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. On an early day in November of 2010, while most internet users in Japan were still engaged in their usual discussions about anime, politics, or everyday life, a post suddenly appeared on a forum called 2channel that sent shockwaves through the entire community. I come from the year 2062. The anonymous man claimed to be a time traveler, coming from a future more than half a century ahead. He asserted that his journey wasn't driven by curiosity or experimentation, but was instead a mission, one that held life or death consequences for the world we live in. But what made that post stand out from the thousands of jokes that had circulated on the internet before was how it ended. At the very bottom, the writer left behind a bizarre message, an odd string of symbols, mixing written Japanese with phonetic spellings, looking almost like a cipher. Along with it was a note that many found perplexing. This is advice for modern humanity. Of course, in the early days, no one paid much attention. At the time, people claiming to be time travelers were considered nothing more than characters in comic books, movies, or creepypasta stories online. Most readers who saw the post simply scoffed, dismissing it as just another attention-seeking stunt. Yet, even in that sea of skepticism, there were still a few people who didn't overlook that strange passage. They began analyzing it, decoding it, comparing every symbol and every syllable. And when the first unofficial translation was published, the message revealed itself as something chillingly direct: run to the mountains. At the time, no one understood what that warning was supposed to mean. And so it quickly faded into obscurity until 4 months later. On the morning of March 11th, 2011, the skies over northeastern Japan still held the calm, familiar light of an early spring day. No one could have imagined that, within moments, this very region would become the epicenter of one of the most catastrophic disasters in the modern history of the land of the rising sun. At exactly 2:46 p.m., a seismic event measuring over 9.0 on the Richter scale struck the Tohoku region with violent force. The earthquake didn't just crack the ground and bring buildings crashing down. It also triggered a tsunami over 40 meters high that surged inland with almost incomprehensible power. Coastal towns were swept away in an instant. Tens of thousands of people were either killed or went missing. And the entire world watched in stunned silence as Japan struggled to stay afloat amid a sea of destruction and grief. And in that moment, when humanity stood face to face with the sheer fury of nature, some people suddenly remembered a strange phrase that had appeared on an internet forum just months earlier: run to the mountains. What had once been dismissed as nothing more than a clumsy internet hoax now took on an eerie new weight. Many who had laughed at the warning found themselves haunted by regret. The disturbing alignment between the self-proclaimed time traveler's cryptic message and the real-life disaster that unfolded in 2011 left many feeling shaken and afraid. But that warning wouldn't be the last time the figure known as 2062 would send a chill through the heart of Japan. The man who had once been dismissed as delusional was now being viewed through an entirely different lens. The words that had once been mocked as a joke were now the subject of serious analysis. And then, just as public attention around him began to grow, he returned, unexpectedly, in July of 2011. 2062 reappeared briefly, answering a handful of questions from the online community. Questions focused primarily on how he had known about the earthquake in advance, and whether something even worse still awaited on the horizon, but he offered no further insight. Instead, before vanishing again, he left behind a single message, a promise that he would return once more at a specific point in time, April of 2016. He emphasized that during that period, a major event would take place and urged people to prepare themselves mentally. But he did not reveal what was coming, nor did he issue any further specific warnings. And then, on April 14th, 2016, a powerful earthquake suddenly struck Kumamoto in southern Japan. The seismic event left hundreds injured, destroyed numerous areas, and was followed by aftershocks that rattled the region for days to come. As people were still reeling from the devastation, the very next day, April 15th, 2062 reappeared, just as he had promised 5 years earlier. If his first return in 2011 had left many still wavering between belief and doubt, this second reappearance all but shattered whatever skepticism remained. Once again, a natural disaster had occurred just before his arrival. But unlike his previous appearance, when he had been relatively forthcoming, this time, 2062 remained almost completely silent. Hundreds of questions were sent to him, but every single one was ignored. He left behind only a single message: "I will return on May 17th. And then, once again, he vanished. But those who had been paying close attention to his prior appearances understood something unsettling. When 2062 announced that he would return on a particular day, the truly frightening event tended to occur exactly one day before. And true to pattern, on May 16th, another earthquake struck, this time in Ibaraki Prefecture, not far from Tokyo. Though smaller in scale than the disasters before it, the tremor still caused significant damage, adding yet another layer of unease across Japan. The earthquakes that occurred in close succession to each of 2062's appearances were no longer seen as mere coincidences. With 3 accurate predictions, each one occurring just a day before a natural disaster, the online community began to truly believe in what he was saying. In his next return, rather than avoiding questions as he had done before, he finally revealed what many had long been waiting for: how he was able to know the future. According to 2062, humanity in the future had not only succeeded in traveling forward through time, but had also reached the point of being able to return to the past. He spoke of 2 types of devices, one called the Vicious 5000, which was designed to move a person forward along the timeline, and another model, Plusnek 6290, that allowed for the opposite direction, returning to the past. These devices, he explained, were not owned by individuals, but were under the strict control of an entity known as the Temporal Management Bureau, an organization founded to monitor, regulate, and safeguard the stability of humanity's entire timeline. And with these devices came the establishment of a comprehensive set of temporal rules. 2062 emphasized, anyone who undertakes a journey through time must adhere to those rules without exception. No revealing of information that could alter history. No interference with events that might affect the chain of causality. No exploitation of future knowledge for personal gain. And even more severe, violating these rules would result in the traveler being erased entirely from the timeline. According to the way he explained it, time was not simply a linear stream, but rather a self-regulating structure with its own form of awareness. When a rule-breaking anomaly enters the system, a self-erasure mechanism activates to eliminate the disturbance. And because of these restrictions, 2062 explained why he could never share the very things people most wanted to know. The reason he vanished after every appearance was due to strict limitations on how long a traveler could remain in the past. A time traveler, he said, could only exist in a former era for a very specific, limited window of time. In one of his rare appearances, when asked directly about the true dangers that lay ahead, 2062 did not hesitate. He spoke plainly, without evasion. He stated that a third world war would break out before the year 2030. And the most terrifying part, he said, wasn't that the war would happen, but how it would happen. According to what he revealed, the origins of the conflict would not stem from a single dramatic event, but from decades of unresolved tensions, long-standing hostilities between 2 unnamed nations in Asia. He did not disclose which countries they were. but he insisted that these buried disputes would eventually ignite, pulling the world into a war of unprecedented scale. Asia, he said, would be the first to burn. Then, one by one, the United States, Russia, the Middle East, and much of Europe would follow. But what would make this world war different from any before it, he warned, was the weaponry involved. Not nuclear arms, but chemical weapons. And according to 2062, the devastation they would bring would be even more horrific than that of atomic bombs. Japan, he said, would come perilously close to being erased from the map. Cities would fall, landscapes would become wastelands, and the population would scatter, millions forced to flee, turning the country into a sea of refugees and ruins. After all his reappearances and vanishings, after every prophecy that had come true with unnerving accuracy, 2062 vanished completely from Japan's online forums. But even in his absence, he left behind two final coded messages for those who still believed in his words and were determined to uncover their meaning. The first was a cryptic warning. On July 4th, 2025, a major earthquake will occur off the coast of Japan. This prediction eerily aligned with details found in a prophetic manga discussed in a previous video, raising a disturbing possibility that the catastrophe may indeed come to pass. And then came the second message, the final warning 2062 ever left behind before disappearing forever. In 2024, a major event will occur. We are now living in the year 2025, but when we look back at 2024, it is difficult not to reflect on that warning with unease. First, the world experienced record-breaking heat, making 2024 the hottest year in human history. Then came a series of devastating superstorms, Typhoon Yagi in Asia, Hurricane Milton in the United States, and catastrophic flash floods that swept through Afghanistan. These disasters, when viewed together, seem to fulfill 2062's forewarning. And yet, one question remains unanswered. Among all these tragedies, which one was the major event he spoke of? Or has it yet to come? You may not believe every prediction, and maybe to you, 2062 is nothing more than an internet phenomenon. But if this story made you pause, even for just a moment, to think about the future, then feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to continue exploring the unsolved mysteries of our world with us, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Until next time, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.